I'm here today with Steve Chandler, internationally renowned success coach, author of more than 30 books, and founder and primary teacher at the Coaching Prosperity School, which is now available online. Today we'll be talking about the book The Very Best of Steve Chandler, which is composed of selections drawn from some of Steve's most beloved books, including Time Warrior, Wealth Warrior, Crazy Good, Death Wish, Right Now, Creator, 50 Ways to Create Great Relationships, Shift Your Mind, Shift the World, and several others. Thanks so much for being here, Steve. You write about everything: music, poetry, literature, business, sports, addiction and recovery. What drew you to so many subjects, and what is there a common thread that runs through them all?
Well, I think what drew me was just the things I loved about music, about poetry, about psychology, philosophy, all the things that I really love to learn about and talk about. And the books were all designed in a way to be helpful to other people, to help them. For example, with the book on creativity, I wanted readers to see that they had more creativity than they realized. Most people don't even realize the wellspring of divine creativity they have access to. So what ties all the books together is a desire to share what helped me with other people.
What do you hear when people say, I'm not creative?
Well, what I hear is a limited definition, a an old idea that creative people have something special. They have a special pre-existing talent that average people, normal people, most people don't have. So when a person says, I'm not creative, they're limiting their definition of creativity to being able to paint, being able to write songs, all these little narrow avenues in which creativity is celebrated in the culture. But the problem with that kind of narrowing down of the definition of creativity is the very belief I'm not creative. So people don't tune into their own creative potential because they've believed they're not creative.
What do you think gets in the way of people's natural creative flow?
Beliefs, beliefs they've accumulated over time about themselves and their own limitations, uh, and also the pursuit of survival and the pursuit of appreciation and acknowledgement, all the things people chase after outside themselves for pleasure, completely shut down the ability to create and the time to create and the acknowledgement and the connection with divine creativity. It's completely ignored. So it's the beliefs about my limitations, and it's also my willy-nilly, highly distractible pursuit of pleasure, gratification, instant gratification, acknowledgement from others, respect, all the things in Western culture that people are pursuing left and right without really settling down to the real true source of fulfillment and happiness, which always includes being aware of one's creative capacity.
You got a great example for dealing with writer's block. You use a great metaphor. Would you care to share that?
Yeah, I know you coach writers and work with writers more than I do, but the few that I've worked with often try to sell me on this thing they've heard about called writer's block. I'm blocked. I'm stuck. I can't think of what to write. I'm totally blocked. I can't write right now. And it's a misunderstanding of how writing works. It's a misunderstanding of the blue collar nature of creative writing, showing up for your job. And it's not as mystical and mysterious as people like to make it. That's part of the myth of creativity, is it's got some magical aspect to it. And so I like to tell people, well, why don't you just put on your coveralls and show up and write like a trucker would do? If you drive a truck, you're not going to call your manager and say, I can't drive today. And he says, why not? And the trucker says, I have trucker's block. I'm just blocked. I can't drive. So no one would say that because it's ridiculous. Your job is to get behind the wheel and drive. So if I'm writing a book, my job is to show up at the appointed time and darken the page with words. That's it. And that's how books are written. People show up and write. What if I can't write? Well, the answer to that is just write. Write badly, write poorly, write boring stuff, but get the flow going, get into the rhythm, and the writing will come.
Yeah, that makes me think. You recommended that Leonard Cohen documentary to me, Hallelujah, which I watched, and it was beautiful. And one of the things that it made me realize when Cohen was talking about his writing process is that spending time in that space of creativity, whether or not something comes, is sort of it's the opening of the door to allow it. We don't normally allow it because I don't know, because it's ineffable, or it's less tangible than the day-to-day activities. What is it that you appreciate about Cohen, since we're on the topic?
Yeah, I like that. And I love that documentary. I recommend it to anyone who is interested in creativity. It's a beautiful film, or interested in his music or that song in particular. Hallelujah. I love about Cohen that he really showed up for work. He wrote so many verses to that song before he selected the final four or five. He wrote something like 60, and he wrote it over years and kept returning to it, like someone who was an architect or built a cathedral or something. He was so devoted to the creative process. And I think it's hard for people to show up empty and vulnerable, show up in the creative space. It 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 you have to let go of control in a lot of ways, and allow the flow, allow the right side of the brain to become active and give you pictures and bring you visions and bring stories forward and metaphors, and it's a form of surrender. So it's very hard for a lot of people to do. They sit down, they try to write a book, or they try to write a blog post or a good long email, and they start editing themselves while they're writing. And so they write a sentence, and then they wonder if that really says what they want to say, and they wonder what the reader would think of that sentence. And so there's no flow at all. And it takes practice. As you know, you're a songwriter and a novelist, and you know about writing. It takes practice. It takes returning to the empty page and sitting down and letting whatever flows flow.
Yeah, that's great, and it does strike me as you're talking that Cohen was working. He released an album a month before he died, and the quality of his work seemed to be pretty consistent throughout his life,
Yeah.
which seems to reflect a kind of dedication and the power of being able to return to that creative space.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
can you transpose this over into other areas of life that are not about creativity?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I think it's important because people think that they might go to that documentary and think, "Oh, well, that applies to songwriting," but I'm a lawyer, or I'm an arborist, or whatever I am. I'm an accountant, or I'm a coach, and so where's creativity? Well, it's everywhere. The opportunity for a more creative response to a situation is always there in every moment. So creativity, there's an opportunity for creativity in our lives. We can create our day, create our week, create our career, and we just don't think of it that way, so we don't apply the all the beauty and the courage and the freedom of creativity to mundane things. My coach used to draw that realization out of me because I was a believer, like most people, that creativity applied to little tiny areas of life, like songwriting or painting, watercolors, or whatever, playing jazz with a group, something. Um, and but whenever I had a real world problem, and I had many, I had uh, so many that it was hard to choose which one to bring into each coaching session. He would ask me to tell him the problem, describe it, and then he would hear it. He would neutralize the situation like it's just a situation. And given the situation, what would you like to create? He never went to how do we solve this problem. He never gave the power or even used the word problem, which is a powerful word. You know, Houston, we've got a problem. You walk into anybody's room, any of your relatives, friends, or co-workers, and say, "Hey, we've got a problem." You all of a sudden, everybody's heart sinks and they've got butterflies. What is it? What is it? So the word itself is charged with negativity and ooh. So he would say, okay, given this situation, what would you like to create? So if I had a debt, I had government tax debt, they were pounding at my door, and you say, okay, that's the situation. What would you like to create? And at first, I would say, well, what do you mean? There's a problem I have to solve over there. I got to make that problem go away. That problem is the problem. And he would say, no, that's there. It's a situation. But the solution isn't over there. The solution's in you. The solution is in whatever you choose to create. And you want to create a relationship with your creditor that allows you to stay in touch with them so they're not bugging you. And would you like to create a payment plan that you can really do? Would you like to create a certain amount of money to pay them off? What do you want to create? So he would always bring everything back. Even if I had a relationship issue, he would say, okay, you have a relationship problem, and she doesn't like this, and you're trying to fix that. What would you like to create? What do you mean, what would I like to create? How do I solve this problem? Give me a script. How do I change her? And everything would always return to my own, every human's creativity. And after a while, with enough of that coaching, I began to think that way. That something would arise, some situation. Okay, given the situation, what would I like to create? And that would really open up the parameter of what might be possible instead of just zeroing in on the problem itself and giving the problem, the so-called problem, all the power. Creativity became the power.
Yeah, that's great. It makes me think. It sort of inverts this. It makes you aware of the human capacity to not just solve problems, but it sort of become the fundamental source of what happens in your life. And yeah, it makes that explanation, that way of living, sort of puts you in the driver's seat, not in like a way of super massive control over everything, but of flow, being in a kind of a flow of life.
Yes, exactly. And it drops you out of thought.
Mm.
It drops you out of, I mean, you can use thought as a tool of creativity, but when the chips are down, everyone is incredibly creative. They figure a way out. Sometimes you're in traffic and all of a sudden a car crosses into your lane and you drive up on the embankment and up and around and you don't even know where that. I didn't think, hey, maybe if I go, there's an embankment there, that looks safe enough to go on. There's no thought. You went into some kind of divine flow in that moment, in that crisis, that drove you, and then thoughts returned later. Wow, how did I do that? That was amazing. And I wasn't even thinking at the time. I ran in the house. I heard the house was on fire. Heard a little dog barking. I ran in. I grabbed it and ran out. Whoa, you've got a lot of courage. Well, no, I don't. Well, how'd you do that then? I just did what, when you see people on news shows who did something heroic. Hey, you ran and pulled that person out from under the car. You're very courageous. And people say, oh, I just did what anyone would do. And it's their only way of explaining, it wasn't really me who did that. That's their only way to put into words that I was guided by a force greater than myself, which I choose to call divine creativity. Some people would say is God. Some people would say the universe or whatever, consciousness. But that's what we're talking about here. And that's what's available to everybody. There aren't creative people and non-creative people. That's just how they label and restrict themselves.
Yeah. At the end of Crazy Good, there's a beautiful passage, which I'll read just a part of and then ask a question about. It's in a chapter, I saw the news today, oh boy. In the house across the street, someone is helping a friend recover from alcoholism. That will not make the news today. They are sitting on a couch and talking gently about the steps of recovery and what it means to live one day at a time. The wild, affirming rain hits their window. A life is changed for the better. Gentle hope is replacing depression. Now I turn my head a little away from the picture window and I stare at the TV screen next to the window. And you go into talking about watching the news, the violent, distressing, scary news, how what's happening across the street will not make the news, like you say. What are you saying about how we spend our lives, where we can focus our attention, and how that affects us?
Yeah, it's a wake-up call to me to realize that what I see on the news or on the internet as I do my doom scrolling through all these horrifying stories, that the news and the internet is based on clickbait. It's based on ratings, and the news gets higher ratings when something horrible is going on. And so when they look to see what they're going to present, they look for really alarming, distressing, outrageous activity, because that's what gets the ratings, which brings the advertising money, which gives the news station their profit. And so the problem with it is that even though that's real, that's reality. It is such a distortion of reality. It's such a misrepresentation of what's really occurring in the world. Somebody's walking a dog. Somebody's helping someone across the street. That we tend to focus so much on the outrageous and what we're mad at or what we're outraged by, that we miss the total picture. So we get unrealistic anxiety and things like that, and we're just drawn to these things until we wake up to the fact that I would like to be informed of what's going on, but I don't want to be addicted and drawn in and place too much emphasis, significance on a tiny sample size of what's really going on in the world. I want to. It's the real reality is across the street inside that house. So that's what I was trying to say in that chapter. Is let's wake up to what the news really is trying to do to draw us in, and take it in small doses.
And to the beauty of the mundane.
Yeah, and mundane is a way to diminish its significance. You know, the everyday, the mundane, the miracle of a wildflower growing between coming up through the concrete on the sidewalk, something like that. Oh, that's not important. What's important is what this world leader is saying to that world leader today, and the tweet that this politician put out. I want to see the beauty of life as my primary reality,
and being present with a wildflower coming up through the cracks in the cement is much more. It feels more enriching. It touches a different level of the soul, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right. And art and music at its best brings that back alive in us, the beauty, truth and beauty. There is a rose in Spanish Harlem that grows through the concrete.
There's a couple times in this wonderful book that you say that you're not saying anything original. The only thing I would challenge with that is that everything that you say filters through who you are, through who Steve Chandler is. And there is a warmth and a wisdom and a colorfulness and humor and everything like that, that I just want to acknowledge, because I think it's a very distinctive voice. I read your stuff, and it blends from coaching and self-help well into the literature area in terms of the richness of life that flows through it. So I just want to say I appreciate that. And I think that's one of the great values of this book.
Well, with your editing help on the book, which I'm grateful to you for, I think it turned out to be what I wanted it to be, so that you could open it anywhere. There wasn't something you had to keep track of or follow or build upon. You could open it anywhere, and the short chapters in there are fairly self-contained. So it's not a big reading project. It's something you can keep handy and open here and there. And everything in there is somehow related, and I only see this looking back, it wasn't my intention, but somehow related to the capacity human beings have to change, to become more spiritual, happier, more creative, enjoy life more effective in what they do. And that runs through. I noticed later, after everything we selected to put in there, when you open it at random, you can read any chapter, and that theme will come forth. It won't be something where it'll feel out of context. And so that's one thing about that book. If I had to leave only one book behind for my family to read about what my life's work was about in coaching and teaching, that would be the book. That turned out to be the book I wanted it to be. For that reason, you can open it anywhere. You don't have to read 500 pages, which is a daunting challenge. A lot of people, it's such a large book, a lot of people using it for a doorstop or to change. It can help you change a light bulb. It can be a weapon if there's a home invasion. And last resort, you can read a little bit.
Yeah, well, I second that. Not about the doorstop or the light switch, but I did pick it up and reread sections before we met today, and I'm constantly amazed at how I know that I've read it before, but I'm getting something new out of it every time, and I really appreciate that. So, thank you very much for talking with me today.
You're welcome, Chris, and thank you for the role you've played with so many of my books. Without your editing and guidance, they wouldn't be what they are.
I really appreciate that. Yeah. You can find out more about Steve, his work, and his coaching prosperity school at stevechandler.com. The Very Best of Steve Chandler is published by Maurice Bassett and is available on Amazon and other fine booksellers. Thanks very much, Steve.
You're welcome.